The shadows of storm and night, the mysteries of life and light, from unearthly peculiarities, celestial and divine, to apparitions and transcendental signs. You're listening to the Spirit Podcast.
Some objects are more than just lifeless things. They hold energy, intent, and sometimes something far darker. You might think of famous cursed items like the Hope Diamond, Annabelle the Doll, or the Dybbuk box. But what about the lesser-known relics? The ones tucked away in private collections, hidden in attics, or long since buried for the sake of humanity? Tonight, we unravel the stories of cursed objects that haven't made the headlines, but have left their own trail of terror in history. Objects that whisper in the dark, bring misfortune to those who dare to own them, and refuse to be forgotten. I'll begin with a tale lost to time, one that starts with seemingly innocent discovery in an old farmhouse and ends in tragedy. In 1921, in the quiet town of Ashmore, Illinois, a man named Thomas Leland stumbled upon something unusual while renovating an abandoned farmhouse. Underneath a rotting floorboard, he discovered a gold ring, thick, heavy, and engraved with strange symbols that didn't match any language he had seen before. Thinking he had found a valuable antique, Thomas slipped the ring onto his finger and kept it. That night, he awoke, gasping for air, his chest feeling like it was being crushed by an unseen force. He dismissed it as a nightmare until it happened again the next night, and the night after that. Soon, his wife Eleanor began experiencing the same torment. She swore she saw a shadow standing at the foot of the bed, its eyes like embers glowing in the dark. Their daughter, barely 6 years old, would wake up screaming, claiming that the man in the floor was trying to take her away. Desperate for answers, Thomas sought out a local historian who had studied the area's folklore. What he learned chilled him to the bone. The farmhouse had once belonged to a reclusive blacksmith in the late 1800s, a man accused of forging cursed items for those who wished harm upon their enemies. When he died mysteriously, it was said that his most powerful curse was buried with him. Realizing the ring might be connected to the blacksmith's dark craft, Thomas tried to rid himself of it. He threw it into the river, only to find it back on his bedside table the next morning. He buried it in the woods, but a week later, their daughter found it in the garden. No matter what they did, the ring returned. Then, on the anniversary of finding the ring, tragedy struck. Thomas was found dead in his bed, his face frozen in terror, his hands clenched as if trying to rip something off his own body. The ring was still on his finger. Eleanor, now a widow, took no chances. She traveled 3 towns over to find an old woman known for removing the unwanted. The woman took one look at the ring and whispered a single word: condemned. She refused to touch it and advised Eleanor to bury it in a cemetery among the forgotten and the forsaken. Eleanor followed the instructions, and for the first time in months, the nightmares ceased. No one knows exactly where she buried it, but some say that in certain graveyards near Ashmore, if you dig too deep, you might just unearth a golden ring and whatever darkness still clings to it. Some things are best left buried. But how many more cursed objects are simply waiting to be found?
In the heart of Bruges, Belgium, tucked away in a forgotten section of an antique shop, sat a Venetian-style mask unlike any other. It was made of fine porcelain, its surface cracked with age. The mask's painted expression was haunting, lips slightly parted, and streaks of what looked like dried tears trailing from its hollow eye socket. Madeleine Rousseau, a French art historian, was drawn to it the moment she saw it. Something about its sorrowful expression fascinated her. The shop owner, an older man with wary eyes, refused to touch it, letting Madeleine lift it from its perch herself.
"That mask,"
he muttered.
"It mourns those who wear it."
Ignoring his cryptic warning, Madeleine purchased the mask, intending to research its origins. But from the moment she brought it home, strange things began happening. The first night, she placed the mask on a stand in her bedroom. As she drifted to sleep, she swore she heard a woman softly weeping. The next morning, she found the mask had shifted positions, its tear-streaked eyes now turned towards her bed. Thinking she had simply imagined it, she continued her research. She traced the mask's origins back to the 17th century, to a Venetian noblewoman named Isabella de Carora. Legend had it that Isabella had fallen in love with a man beneath her station. When her family discovered the affair, they forced her to watch as her lover was executed before her eyes. Consumed by grief, she locked herself away, refusing to eat, refusing to speak. When she was finally found lifeless in her chamber, she wore a mask, one identical to the one Madeleine had purchased. It was said that Isabella's soul never truly left. The mask was passed down through different hands over the centuries, each owner plagued by misfortune. Some fell ill, others lost their loved ones in cruelly ironic ways. And all of them, without fail, claimed to hear the sound of weeping in the night. Madeleine, skeptical but uneasy, decided to lock the mask away in a cabinet. That night, the weeping returned, closer this time. The sound of soft footsteps padded across her floor. Then came the whisper. "Why do you turn away?" The voice was fragile, distant, yet filled with sorrow so deep it made Madeleine's heart ache. Terrified, she threw open the cabinet. The mask was no longer on the stand. It was on the floor, facing upward, and a single fresh tear streaked its porcelain cheek. That was the last night Madeleine kept it. The next morning, she rushed back to the antique shop, demanding to return it. The owner only nodded, as if expecting her.
"You are lucky,"
he said, placing the mask back in its spot.
"It only wept for you. Others it has made weep in return."
To this day, the mask remains in that shop, untouched, waiting. And if you ever find yourself wandering the antique stores of Bruges, listen carefully. You might just hear a woman softly crying. Some sorrow lingers long after death, and some objects carry it forever.
In the autumn of 1976, a retired school teacher named Walter Kemp moved into a modest home in upstate New York. The house was nothing special. Quaint, quiet, the kind of place an old man could live out his years in peace. But tucked away in the attic, covered in dust, was a single piece of furniture the previous owners had left behind. A rocking chair. Walter wasn't superstitious, but there was something about that chair. It was old, carved from dark oak, its arms worn smooth from years of use. And no matter where he moved it, storage room, basement, even the shed, it always seemed to find its way back to the attic. The first time he noticed it, he brushed it off. The second time, he started to wonder if he was forgetting where he'd put it. But by the third time, when he locked it in the garage only to find it sitting in the attic the next morning, he knew something was off. At night, he began hearing sounds from above, slow, rhythmic creaks, as if someone or something was rocking back and forth in the attic. Then came the knocking. 3 sharp raps on the attic door at exactly 3 a.m. One night, Walter finally had enough. He grabbed a flashlight, stormed upstairs, and threw open the attic door. The chair was rocking on its own. And there, in the dust-covered floor beneath it, were 2 deep indentations, as if unseen feet had been resting there. The next morning, Walter called a local historian to research the home's past. What he found disturbed him. In the 1930s, the house had belonged to a man named Henry Malden, a reclusive figure known for his fascination with the occult. Neighbors reported seeing him sitting in that very rocking chair for hours, muttering in a language no one recognized. They claim he spoke to someone or something that wasn't there. Henry died suddenly in that chair, and according to the old records, the coroner had found his body stiff, his eyes wide in terror, his fingers digging into the arms of the rocker. The cause of death was unknown. Walter didn't need any more convincing. He had the chair taken to an antiques dealer miles away, leaving it in their care. But before he left, the dealer, an older woman with a wary gaze, warned him, "Some things hold their owners even after death. If that chair wants to return, it will." And she was right. A week later, Walter came home to find the attic door wide open. Inside, the rocking chair was back, slowly moving back and forth. He moved out the following month. No one knows what happened to the chair after that, but the house has changed owners 6 times since then. And in each case, the new residents report hearing the same thing at night. A slow, rhythmic creaking, like something rocking, waiting. Some objects can be given away. Others make sure they're never truly lost.
Hey, Spirit Seekers. Enjoying the show? Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the Spirit. If you could you leave us a review on Apple or Spotify and share the love? We drop a new video every week over on our YouTube channel, covering paranormal, conspiracy, high strangeness, and more. Have questions or you want to share your own spooky story? Drop us a line at tothespiritpod@gmail.com. Stay spirited.
Some cursed objects are meant to be hidden away, locked behind glass, or buried in forgotten graves. But then there are those that travel, objects that seem to find their way into unsuspecting hands, carrying with them a darkness that refuses to fade. And one such object, a book. One that should have never been read. In 1842, in a small village on the outskirts of Prague, a traveling bookseller named Elias Varga arrived with a collection of rare tomes. Among them was one that immediately caught the attention of a local scholar, Victor Novak. It was a ledger, bound in black leather, its pages aged and brittle, filled with names written in an ink so dark that it seemed almost fresh. But there was something strange about it. The names inside didn't belong to the living. They belonged to the dead. At first, Victor believed it was simply a record of the deceased. But as he flipped through the pages, he noticed something chilling. Some names were crossed out with deep, angry strokes. Dates of birth and death scribbled beneath them. And then he found the blank pages. At the bottom of each empty page was a single sentence written in Latin. Scripta maned anima sequitur. What is written remains, the soul follows. That night, Victor left the book on his desk. But when he woke the next morning, something had changed. His name was now written inside, and the date of his death was blank. Terrified, he tried to burn it. The flames wouldn't touch the pages. He buried it in a churchyard, but then the next evening it was waiting for him on his doorstep, perfectly clean. Then the deaths began. First, his closest friend, a fellow scholar, was found dead in his study, his name freshly crossed out in the book. Then, a young apprentice who had merely touched the cover fell ill and never recovered. Victor knew he had to get rid of it. Under the cover of the night, he fled the village, leaving the ledger behind in an abandoned monastery, locked in a rusted iron chest. But the legend says that years later, the chest was found open. The book was gone. Since then, there had been scattered reports of a strange black ledger appearing in estate sales, in the back rooms of antique shops, even in forgotten attics. Each time, new names are found inside, and each time, those names eventually vanish from this world. No one knows where the book is now. But if you ever stumble upon a tattered ledger with pages that seem just a little too fresh, don't open it. Don't read the names. And whatever you do, don't look for yours. Some books tell stories. Others write endings.
In Slovakia, there are whispers of a doll, not just any doll, one that carries a dark and terrible history. One tied to a name that still fills these lands with unease. Bathory. Čachtice Castle, once home to infamous Countess Elizabeth Bathory, holds many dark secrets. Tales of blood rituals, vanished servants, and silent screams of the unfortunate girls who entered and never left. But not every victim was forgotten. Among the artifacts recovered from the castle ruins, there was a small wooden doll, hand-carved, its painted face faded with time. It was found hidden within the castle walls, wrapped in aged linen. The strangest thing, it was stitched with human hair. The doll was taken to a local museum in Trenčín, placed on display alongside relics from Bathory's era. But almost immediately, strange things began to happen. Visitors reported an unsettling feeling near the displays, an overwhelming sense of sadness or fear. Some claimed that they heard whispers in the still air, soft and pleading, as if from the lips of a girl long forgotten. Then came the incidents. One museum worker assigned to clean the display was found unconscious beside the case, her wrists bruised as if held by unseen hands. Another refused to enter the room entirely, claiming she saw the doll's lips move, whispering words in a language she did not understand. But the most chilling tale came from a woman who dared to touch it. A tourist, ignoring the sign, reached out and traced her fingers along the wooden cheek of the doll. That night, she woke to the feeling of ice-cold hands pressing against her throat. Gasping, she turned on the light, only to find long strands of dark hair scattered across her pillow. Hair that wasn't hers. She left Slovakia the next day, but before she boarded her plane, she noticed something terrifying. On her arm, just beneath her wrist, was a faint but undeniable scratch. A single word carved into her skin as if by a needle. Nezabudni. Do not forget. The doll remains in the museum today, sealed behind glass, its origin still unknown. Some believe it belonged to one of Bathory's victims, a girl who was never found, her name lost to time. Others say it holds the spirit of someone seeking justice. But one thing is certain. If you ever visit the museum and stand before that case, listen closely. You just might hear a whisper, asking you not to forget. Some toys are meant to bring comfort. Others carry only sorrow.
Most cursed objects are old, ancient things with dark histories. But sometimes a curse isn't centuries old. Sometimes it's just waiting for the right person. And that's exactly what happened to a girl named Liv. Liv was just a normal high school girl. Nothing special, nothing weird. One day, she and her best friend, Haley, were at this old thrift store downtown, digging through bins of random junk. That's when they found the bracelets. They were identical, woven with red and black thread, tiny silver charms hanging from them. Nothing fancy, just the kind of thing you'd get for $1 at a flea market. OMG, matching bestie bracelets, Haley said. They bought them, tied them on each other's wrists, and that was that. At first, nothing happened, but that night, Liv woke up feeling weird, like someone was in the room with her. She swore she heard whispering, soft, raspy voice. But when she turned on the light, nothing. The next day at school, Haley wasn't there. No texts, no calls, just gone. That night, Liv finally got a message from her, but it wasn't a text, it was a voice memo. She pressed play, and all she heard was breathing, slow, deep. And then Haley's voice, whispering, "Take it off now." Liv ripped the bracelet off so fast she almost tore her skin. She tried calling Haley, but the call wouldn't go through. The next morning, the school principal made an announcement. Haley had gone missing. Liv ran home, searching everywhere for the bracelet. She had thrown it on her nightstand. She was sure of it. But now, it was gone. That night, her phone buzzed again. Another voice memo. She pressed play. This time, she heard footsteps, a dragging sound, and then Haley's voice, distant, echoing. "Why did you leave me?" The next morning, they found Haley in the river, her bracelet still tied to her wrist. Liv never saw the second bracelet again. Some say she got rid of it. Some say someone else found it. Every now and then, people swear they see a red and black woven bracelet in that same thrift store, waiting for its next best friend. Some friendships last forever. Some don't give you a choice.
Curses take many forms. Some are written in ink, waiting for the next name to be added. Some are stitched with hair, holding on to sorrow of the past. Some are worn without a second thought until it's too late. But all of them have one thing in common. They never really disappear. They change hands, travel through time, and wait for someone unsuspecting. Someone curious, someone who doesn't believe. Maybe that someone is you. So the next time you find something unusual, a book, a doll, a bracelet, a relic with a history no one wants to talk about, ask yourself, who owned it before you? And more importantly, who still does?
In the heart of Slovakia, where rivers weave through dense forests, there are tales of beings who dwell beneath the water surface. beings who collect more than just trinkets. They collect souls. In the village of Boki, nestled along the Var River, fishermen often spoke of the vodnik, the waterman. They describe him as having a long beard, sometimes appeared naked, other times wearing a blouse dripping with water. His presence was both feared and respected. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a young fisherman named Marek cast his nets into the river. As he waited, he noticed something peculiar, a series of clay pots lined up along the river bank, each sealed tightly. Curiosity got the better of him. He approached the pots and with hesitant hands opened one. A chilling wail escaped, and the translucent figures rose, vanishing into the night sky. Marek realized, with mounting dread, that these were not ordinary pots. They were the vodnik's pots, each containing a captured soul. Terrified, Marek fled, leaving the pots undisturbed. That night, he was haunted by visions of the vodnik, his eyes blazing like dishes, demanding the return of his treasures. The village elders, upon hearing Marek's tale, warned everyone to stay away from the river at dusk, lest they too become prisoners within the vodnik's pots. To this day, it's said that on quiet nights, if you listen closely by the Var River, you can hear the faint cries of those still trapped, waiting for someone to set them free. Some vessels carry water, others carry the weight of lost souls.
We've traveled through shadows tonight, uncovering the objects, the relics, the things left behind. From haunted dolls to curse bracelets, from forgotten relics to the unseen forces that refuse to let go. But curses don't stay locked away in the past. They wait. They watch. And maybe, just maybe, they're closer than you think. But before we step away from the darkness, I want to take a moment to thank those who helped bring these eerie tales to life. To Kat, Peter, Rachel, Monika, Gabriella, and Drahoslav, your voices carried these stories into the unknown, and for that, we are grateful. And to you, dear listener, be careful what you bring home. Be careful what you touch, because sometimes the haunted finds you.
To the spirit
podcast,
supernatural science,
aliens, ghost,
psychic, mystic,
spirit,
divine source,
heaven,
The dead. It's magic.